Let's go. Let's get into it. This is episode 640 of the Soul Not For Sale podcast, and we got Tucker Carlson giving us an excellent message on bravery. And it comes at a perfect time. And I don't even think we realize how perfect timing this is, because it'll make more sense in the next 6 to 12 months. There's going to be a lot of need for bravery. There already is in your life. But just as a nation, as nations, wherever you are in the world right now seeing this, it's so important that you be brave. Because the only reason that the powers that be have gotten to the point that they are right now is because so many of us have chosen to lack bravery. And this is myself included. I'm not just pointing fingers at anybody. This is myself included. I was brave through the past 4 years. I stood on my values and didn't waver. I made sure my wife did as well. We made the sacrifices. I lost a very good job. I had to find another one. I delivered food because of my beliefs. Like I showed it through that. But there's going to be so much more, and is so much more, that you're going to have to be brave through. And it's not going to just have to be a bravery that you do inside of your house or with your beliefs on the inside. It's going to have to be a bravery that shows out, not speaking about any violence of any kind, but it's going to have to be a bravery that you show to this entity, this power, this attack within that's going on. And Tucker just lays it out so brilliantly. And one thing that he says in this, a little spoiler alert, but one thing that he says is, I would rather die with my shoes on doing something I believe in. And that is perfect to me. That's something that we should all be taking to heart. That's something that we should all be living every single day. And believe me, I've worked in the factories and the food service industry and the low jobs and the white collar jobs and the blue collar jobs and the construction and the landscaping. I've done all of that stuff, and I know that it's hard when you're working these hard days and you just want to get home and just chill. But it seems like we're getting to a time where we're not going to be afforded those luxuries anymore. And it's going to be either you're going out and standing up for those luxuries, that way of life, this way of life, or it's going to be slowly taken away from you. And I think that we've all felt a little bit of that. So I'm not going to make you wait any longer. This is a little longer of a clip than I usually post, but it's worth it. It's worth the listen. It's a great message. And if you have been feeling like, man, I wish that there were more people like me. I wish there were more people willing to stand up like I'm willing to stand up. Well, the only way that you find those people is by standing up yourself. Maybe they're waiting for the same thing you are. And maybe if you're just the first one to do it, stand up, make yourself heard, maybe then they'll all follow suit. But the worst thing to happen in any nation that's engulfed in a mass formation situation is for the people who can see what's going on to remain silent. That's when it really takes hold of a nation. Anyways, guys, let's get into this clip. Before I do, I'm going to bring you to the store. This is the IamCoachColin.com store, and the first shirt on deck is the Soul Not For Sale shirt. I'm bringing you a hoodie because it is October, and for some of you, it's getting into hoodie season. Get yours now. T-shirt too if you want. We also have the certified Pure Blood shirt for those of you that stood tall during the pandemic. Good job. Do not waver. And we have the Public Enemy #1 shirt. For those of you that know about the World Economic Forum and know about this gentleman, you'll understand very clearly why I've put in Public Enemy #1 across his face. All of that's available on IamCoachColin.com. And if you want 10% off of anything you just saw, all you have to do is put in the discount code IamCoachColin. That's all capital letters, all one word, one L inside the name Colin, and that gets you 10% off, no questions asked. And if you've done that with us already, I truly appreciate you. Now let's get into Tucker's speech.
The person who's brave wins, period. And in a moment like this, the stakes are higher. It's not just a matter of like being the next guy who invents something cool and then figures out a way to sell it. No, it's, do you want your children to be able to live here? Do you want to have grandchildren at all? And if you're not brave, that won't happen. And it's very clear at this point. And I could bore you with a lot of dark stats, but I'm not going to because you know them. And so be brave. And by the way, there's nothing easier. The key to being brave is brooding about death. This is just true, I believe. The key to being brave is brooding about death. All anxiety and all fear stems from the most basic of all fears, which is the fear of death, which is inborn. You feel it from the moment you arrive, because you know it's going to end on some level. My deepest child on our 5th birthday burst into tears, and I said, why? All my other more shallow children were psyched for the cake. My deep child said, well, I don't want it to end. And I said, what? My life. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I could drown in these waters. They're too deep. I did start crying. Yes, I did. Okay, I'll admit it. But anyway, whether we articulate it or not, that is the root of all anxiety. And so you need to focus on that. And I grew up in a place when I was a kid called La Jolla, California, which had a lot of, I know someone just snickered. Okay, got it. Yes, I know. It has a lot going for it. It's beautiful and all that. But in retrospect, the one thing that made it a really bad place actually to grow up and to live, and why I don't visit anymore, is there was only one taboo in La Jolla and in all kind of affluent towns like La Jolla in the West, which is death. It's like the one thing you could not talk about. I mean, people had freaky sex situations in La Jolla that would, even in Wilmington, you'd be shocked by. And I'm serious, okay? It's a little inside joke for people from Wilmington. Oh. Anyway, sorry. But you would be. Like, nothing was judged. Like, well, I ended up, marrying the babysitter, but then I brought the massage therapist in for some polygamy, and people were like, oh, that's cool. Really? Yeah, no problem. No judgment whatsoever. None. The one thing you couldn't do was talk about dying or any of its attendant symptoms like aging. No aging. And if you got old enough and your age was visible enough, you had to go to Palm Springs. You had to, no, I'm serious. It was our equivalent of putting you on the ice floe. Okay, like the Inuit do. Sorry, you just, and it's like, whatever happened to Mrs. So-and-so? I don't know. She was in her 450 SLC just driving east. Never saw her again. And she's in Palm Desert at Thunderbird or whatever. And now she, you don't know. But the one thing you could never say about Mrs. So-and-so is she died like we all will. Totally not acceptable. And as a result of that, beneath, and if those of you who've lived there or know the area or any town like that, I doubt Aspen or Jackson are any different, right? The one thing about those towns is the anxiety level is crazy high. And that's why everyone's on benzos. Or like climbing to the top of Snow King manically or whatever, doing so much cardio that they calm down. I'm not joking. Anyone familiar with the culture I'm talking about? The white wine, now Casamigos, it's changed, but whatever, same idea. There's a crazy amount of anxiety because no one can acknowledge the core truth of life, which is that it ends. And any attempt to even talk about this or engage in a religious discussion, which by definition implies death and powerlessness, was rejected as like repulsive and an attack. And it made everyone crazy, and it made them cowards. That's true. It made them cowards. So as long as you're afraid of that, you're not going to be very effective fighting against people who really are serving a cause they believe is larger than themselves. Now, I think it's Satan or whatever you call it, but it doesn't matter what I think. They believe they are acting on behalf of something larger than themselves, the revolution. And if you're just like, make it go away, I don't want to be uncomfortable, you're going to lose. And the consequences are going to be horrible. Probably not for anyone in this room, because like everyone here is kind of higher income and older like me, but certainly for your kids. There's like no chance they'll prosper in a country like that. There's no chance. And your grandkids, I mean, they'll just be like texting each other, where can we move? Where can we move? Oh, nowhere. So it's essential not to be afraid to die. And once you decide, I'm really not afraid to die, nothing scares you. Like, what's scary at that point? Bring it on. Oh, you're going to criticize me on Facebook. You're going to bring suit against me. You're going to arrest me. You're going to kill me. So what? Go ahead. And I would make two arguments, and I'll stop with this because now I'm really getting crazy, but I mean it. I would make two arguments on behalf of not being afraid of death. And the first is just an obvious mechanistic argument that I think everyone, regardless of religious faith, can understand, which is you're going to anyway, and it's going to be horrible. So, like, why not? You're playing with the house money. And I would recommend one of the greatest essays I've ever read was by George Orwell, written in as part of a book he wrote called Down and Out in Paris and London. But he winds up in a hospital in Paris in the 30s during the Depression with tuberculosis. George Orwell was a man of famous and proven physical courage. He was shot in the throat by a sniper standing guard during the Spanish Civil War on the wrong side, unfortunately, but whatever, he was trying. And didn't mention it in his diary. I mean, this is a man who had, went to Eton, in 1913, grew up rough in the way that the British upper classes used to raise their boys, in a martial way, actually. And he winds up in this hospital for the indigent, and he's in a huge bay, like the size of this room, filled with metal cots, and people around him are dying. But they're not dying of anything interesting. They haven't been shot in the throat by a sniper with an 8mm Mauser round. They're dying of like diarrhea and the flu. And he describes in this wonderful essay how horrible it is. And he has this line there. He says, there's so many tears shed for guys who die, during the Great War, which is only 20 years before, going over the top of the trench and getting mowed down by a 50 cal. And he goes, that's very sad. Obviously, he grew up in a world where all the men were killed that way. But he goes, that's kind of nothing compared to the way the people around me are dying. Like, it's going to be bad no matter what. You might as well die with your shoes on doing something you believe in. That was Orwell's conclusion. In the end, he died of tuberculosis alone. But whatever, he didn't get to choose. None of us do get to choose, but we can have the mindset that frees us from the anxiety over something that we can't change, that's going to happen, and at very best, we can imbue it with meaning. That's the point. That's the choice we have. We're going to die. Should it mean something? Should our life mean something? That's the only choice we get to make. The rest of it is out of our hands. And the second point I would make is something that, I've come to very slowly over many years, but I mean, let's just be totally real. All the religion stuff, basically true. It's basically true. It is. And this is the only civilization that I'm aware of in all human history, and I mean the West post-war. So the last 80 years in the Anglosphere and Western Europe is the only civilization in history that has proceeded on any other assumption but there is a God or gods. It's like, that's a brand new thing. And it turns out, actually, spoiler alert, it doesn't work. Okay. It doesn't work at all. There was something about the atomic bomb going off, in my opinion, that completely changed people's assumptions. And I think that display of godlike power gave people the false impression that they were gods. That's my personal belief. I've never heard anybody say that, but I sincerely believe that. But whatever it was, post-war, our assumptions about the universe changed. And I think in retrospect, we look ridiculous. But nobody else has assumed that. From the Hivaro Indians at the Amazon headwaters to the Swedes. And by the way, thank you for hiring Swedes. No, nobody does. The most secular nation in the world, they were fervent evangelists until about 20 minutes ago. I mean, this is a brand new world that we live in. Not just secular, I mean, that began hundreds of years ago, but a civilization whose core assumption omits the possibility that we're not the most powerful force in the universe. This never happened. And so, I mean, you could even just do the law of averages here. Are we right? Or is every other human being who's ever lived right? So it's Kamala Harris versus all history. What do you think? And I'm kind of thinking the overwhelming evidence lands on there is a God, and this is not the end. Nobody's ever not thought that. And so if you're willing to kind of roll the dice on that, considering you're going to die anyway, there's really nothing to be afraid of other than cowardice. Living as a slave, hating yourself, being held in contempt by those closest to you, living without purpose, those are the things to fear. So I will stop with that and just say, take heart. Take heart. Your bravery is scarier to the other side than any weapon you could marshal. They melt in the face of it. They've only advanced this quickly because they've met no resistance at all, because everybody is a cucked coward. Oh, I don't want to make anybody mad. Yeah, really? It stops here. If you had 10% of the population take that posture, this crap would end immediately. That's it. That's all it takes.
Oh, man. It's so true.
The person who's brave.
So true. Man, I love that. I love that speech. Just so solid. I'm trying to find the full thing for everybody, but I haven't been able to find it. I just found like a large piece, and then that part was just stood out so much. But oh man, that's exactly what it is. And that last part, 10% of the population, that's 100% true. That's 100% true. If 10% of the population just decided, hey, we're just gonna stand our ground. Happened in Canada recently. Canada. There was a bunch of people, they're Muslim. They didn't like what was going on with the schools. They didn't decide to just go to parent-teacher nights. They were doing that and everything, and all the meetings that happened. They decided to get into the streets. They got into the streets, and it was a very large, thousands of people. You know why? Exactly what I said at the beginning. One of them, two of them, three of them stood up, and all of a sudden another 60 of them were like, oh yeah, all right, good. There are some people that feel this way. And then all of a sudden a couple of hundred went, all right, let's stand up. And next thing you know, there was thousands of people in the streets, large protests. And they were met with resistance, but they were heard. That's what matters the most. I mean, the things that Tucker touched on, the root of all anxiety. The fact that he's talking about death and it being the root of all anxiety is very true. And especially nowadays, maybe way back in those, when he's talking about Orwell and the First Great War and all that stuff, maybe it was a different reason. But today, it's the root of all anxiety because you're not doing what you want. You don't get, no one gets to do what they want to do. So it would be terrible. Like, I used to think about this all the time. I'd be on the way to some factory where I didn't like what I was doing whatsoever. And I was like, how terrible would it be if I passed away at this time? Like, that would be the worst. Like, or I'd be at work and I would get hurt, or I'd almost lose a finger on something. I'd be like, I can't believe this is almost going to happen at this place. And that would be a lot of anxiety just in and of itself. But I mean, they believe in something bigger than themselves. When he said and this, he's not touching on who it is. That entity, this other side, he touched on maybe satanic, this, that, but he doesn't really name who. But if you look around, when we think of they believe in something bigger than themselves, I think we see that with the woke movement. I think we see that a lot with the woke movement. They definitely, as much as they are, a lot of them, not all of them, I definitely won't say all of them, but as much as a lot of them are atheists, a bit godless, a bit of worshiping themselves as the end all be all, they definitely believe in something bigger than themselves. And I've said this before, and I heard it from a person named Chad O. Jackson. He was talking about how when somebody is godless, they view where they are now as paradise. And if they view where they are now as their paradise, as their heaven, well, then they're going to fight tooth and nail to have everything be exactly as it should, because this is it for them. Right? Whereas if you believe in God, you know that there's an afterlife and there's this paradise of eternity that you are promised. So that's a big thing there. Just so many things. Living as a slave, the 10% of the population, God, talking about God and how this isn't the end. All these things really, really speak to me. I hope they speak to you too. Yeah, I really do. And again, not calling for any type of violence. It's not the thing, but it's to stand up. Because when you look at woke culture, there are some of them that are committing acts of violence, but a lot of them aren't. They're just getting up in numbers. They're just rounding themselves up in numbers. And they seem to make a bit of a change that way. I mean, they've gotten into the school systems pretty heavily that way. They've gotten into Hollywood pretty heavily that way. There's no violence, They just, media as well, they just try to really control public opinion. But if you can get up, stand up, and voice yourself properly, constructively, you can have, I don't want to say you can sway public opinion, but you can at least show many people the other side of the argument, of life, of this whole thing, by standing up. If a lot of people think Agenda 2030 is about one thing, if you can learn about it and get real constructive about it and talk about it, of all the pitfalls and how bad it can be and what it's leading to, you can maybe open somebody's eyes. Same thing goes with 15-minute cities. Same thing. So many things that we can talk about, where if you can just be constructive about it, get your numbers up together, and really, really combat any speech about it with better speech, Man, just really speaks to me. It makes me think a lot about what I'm doing now. And I hope it makes you think about what you're doing now, because what's in store for us if all of this stuff keeps getting out of control the way it's been? What's in store? And then exactly what Tucker touched on. What's in store for you? Maybe not much. Maybe you're someone who's only going to be here for another 20 years or something. Maybe you're already retired. What about your kids? What about your grandkids? What are you leaving behind for them? What are they going to fall into? What mental traps that are being set up by these people all over the world right now are they going to fall into? It's better to die with your shoes on doing something you believe in. That's 100% true. 100% true. Better to just do and say what you believe in all the time. And again, hard if you're just working a 9-to-5 job. Very hard, but still doable. You can still speak up. You can still be heard constructively. I hope that touched somebody out there. Don't be afraid of death. Don't be afraid to die. It's going to happen. That's the biggest takeaway from the whole thing. It's going to happen anyway. So it might as well be not just on your terms, but it might as well just be you doing everything that it is that you want to do. Makes you think. Really makes you think. Well, guys, if you haven't liked the video already, like the video. If you haven't subscribed already, subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're making 1 to 3 videos a day. And other than that, I'm out. And let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. 10% of the population. 10% of any country can really make a difference. That's why when you look at woke culture and they're really such a small minority of people, you're like, how is all this happening with such a small minority of people? It's because it only takes a small minority of people to just get loud and get organized and come with constructive arguments and to stand your ground. Jordan Peterson once said, he was being questioned about the whole thing that he was going through back in 2017, 2016, where he was talking about pronouns. And the person's like, what are you ever gonna use this, blah blah blah, and he was just like, no, I won't do it. My speech will not be compelled. He goes, if they fire me, he's like, if they try and fire me, he's like, I will go on a hunger strike. He's like, he was like talking about like dying over this, and he's like, I am not doing this. He's like, I will not. And he just stood his ground, and look at where that took him in life. Even if he lost everything, like either way, he was at a point where he was like, either way, something's going to happen. It might as well be completely on my terms. And he made sure it was completely on his terms. He stood his ground, and it propelled him into a place that he couldn't possibly imagine. That's what happens when you follow God and what God's calling you to do. And that's what happens when you follow your heart and listen to what your heart's telling you to do. God Nation family. Other than that, I am out.